You know, sometimes it's the smallest things that bring the past rushing back. Just this morning, I pulled an old pie tin from the back of the cupboard, hadn't seen it in years, and Lord have mercy, the smell of baked apples still clung to it. Cinnamon, nutmeg, a hint of brown sugar. Took me straight back to 1961 like I was 17 again. It's funny, ain't it? How memory don't ask permission. It just shows up, like a knock at the door from someone you thought had moved on. I was standing there in my little kitchen, holding that tin like it was made of gold, and out of nowhere I felt this ache, deep in my chest. Not a bad ache, exactly. Just old. Heavy. Like a song you used to love, but don't play anymore because it makes your throat tight. You know the kind? And that's when it hit me. There's a story I've carried for over half a century. Kept it tucked away like a letter never sent. Not because I was ashamed. No, but because some memories, well, they're stitched into your soul, and unpicking them hurts more than folks realize. Still, I think maybe it's time I shared it. I reckon folks look at me now, gray-haired, knitting on the porch, cat in my lap, and figure I've always been safe. Settled. Boring, even. But child, let me tell you something. Back in my day, I burned just as bright as any of you. Fell head over heels in love with a boy who had a smile like summer and trouble in his bones. I thought he hung the moon. It all started at the county fair, you know, the kind with sticky floors, fried everything, and lights that make the night feel endless. I was wearing a borrowed dress and borrowed lipstick. I remember the way the carousel music mixed with the sound of his laugh. Mercy, that laugh. James Carter. That was his name. He said it like a promise. James Carter. Like I was supposed to remember it forever. And I guess I did. But here's the thing I didn't know back then. Standing in the soft glow of Ferris wheel lights, heart beating wild and full of dreams, that night would be the beginning of everything. The love, the fear, the bruises I'd hide, and the lies I'd tell myself just to sleep at night. That evening wrapped itself around my life like ivy on brick. I didn't see it then. I just knew he made me feel like the only girl in the world. Now, I ain't telling this for pity. I'm telling it because maybe someone out there needs to hear it. Maybe you do. Maybe you've got a James in your past, or worse, in your present. Maybe you've tasted a kind of love that turned sour so slow you barely noticed. Maybe you're still trying to convince yourself that it ain't that bad. Well, I've been there, sugar. And I've got some things to say. So if you've ever believed in love that hurt, or stayed when you should have run, or prayed for someone to change who never did, don't go nowhere. I'm gonna tell you what happened next. And I'll tell you what, it might just be the most important story you hear all day. But before I go on, let me ask you something. Have you ever ignored a red flag because your heart just wanted it to be green? Drop it in the comments. I'll be reading. Back then, things moved slower. Life had a rhythm, like the creak of the porch swing or the ticking of Grandma's old kitchen clock. I grew up in a little white house with blue shutters just outside of Shelbyville, Tennessee. The kind of town where everybody knew everybody, and if you sneezed at church, 3 ladies brought you pie by sundown. We didn't have much, Lord knows we didn't. We didn't have a pot to pee in some years, but we made do with what we had. And what we had was love, homemade jam, and stories whispered under quilts. That was enough. I was the youngest of 4, the quiet one. Always watching, listening, dreaming. I used to lie on my back in the grass and stare at the clouds, trying to decide if I wanted to be a writer, a singer, or somebody's sweetheart. Truth is, I wanted to be all 3. Mama said I was born with a soft heart and a strong will, and I suppose she was right. I believed in good people, in kindness, in holding doors and writing letters and dancing in bare feet. I believed in love, the kind that made your chest flutter and your stomach flip, the kind the ladies whispered about at the beauty parlor, their hair in curlers and eyes full of old secrets. We didn't have internet or fancy phones, just a party line on the wall and a whole lot of front porch conversations. I remember my daddy sitting out there with his coffee, whittling pieces of wood into little birds and dogs. He'd nod at every car that passed, whether he knew them or not. That's just how we did it in those days. Respect was free, and you gave it first. Sundays were for God, fried chicken, and family. Mama's biscuits could make a grown man cry. We'd sing hymns till our voices cracked, then eat till we were too full to move. I still remember the way her apron smelled: flour, lilacs, and something sweet I could never quite name. Lord, if I close my eyes, I can still hear the screen door slam as my brothers raced out to catch lightning bugs. And me? I was just Ruthie then. Ponytail, bare feet, notebook full of poems tucked under my bed. I believed life was a storybook, and my prince was out there, somewhere, just waiting to find me. I had no idea the twists the plot would take. But back then, I was full of light. Hopeful. The kind of girl who wrote Mrs. Ruth Carter in her diary before she even met him. Ain't that something? I thought love would fix everything. That if I was sweet enough, loyal enough, good enough, no one would ever leave. I believed that people didn't just hurt each other on purpose, not the ones who said I love you. And I believed, with every stitch of my heart, that the world was mostly good, that hearts could be mended and wrongs made right. I thought if I held on tight enough, I could save anybody. I didn't know then that sometimes holding on is what breaks you. Still, those days were golden. There's a kind of magic to being that young and that sure of everything, when the world hasn't yet shown you its sharp edges. When you believe promises just 'cause someone says, "I'm sweet enough." I didn't know yet that love could lie, that smiles could cover storms. But I also didn't know yet that love could heal, that it could come back around when you least expect it, quiet and steady, like a man in a pickup truck on a cold Tennessee night. And honey, if you've ever thought your story was over, well, you might want to stick around. Mine was just getting started. It was the summer of '61, hot enough to fry eggs on the sidewalk. I remember that day clear as yesterday, not 'cause anything special was supposed to happen, but because everything changed in a blink. Mama had asked me to take a peach cobbler over to Miss Lila, the widow who lived 2 houses down. Nothing unusual, just a kindness, like we always did. I was wearing my Sunday dress, the one with the faded blue flowers, and had my hair in a braid 'cause of the heat. I wasn't thinking about much, maybe just humming a tune or daydreaming about the fair that weekend. But as I rounded the corner by the old general store, there he was, James Carter, leaning against a red Chevy with the windows down and the radio humming some slow Elvis song. He had on this worn leather jacket, even though it was 90 degrees, like he didn't care what made sense. His hair was slicked back, and he had that kind of grin that made you feel like he already knew something you didn't. Our eyes met for just a second, just a flicker, really, but Lord have mercy. My heart did a little somersault right there in my chest. I couldn't explain it then, and maybe I still can't. But something inside me shifted. He looked at me like he saw me, really saw me. Not just the preacher's daughter, not just that quiet Ruthie girl, but like I was someone worth knowing. And when he said, "Afternoon, darlin'," in that low, easy drawl, I swear the whole world just stopped for a moment. Now, I wasn't one to swoon over boys. I kept to myself mostly. But James had a way about him. He walked like he had a secret. Spoke soft, but you listened. He offered to carry the cobbler dish for me, said it was a crime to let a lady walk alone with her hands full. I didn't argue. We strolled down Maple Lane, and he asked me questions like he genuinely cared about the answers. Nobody ever really asked me things. Not like that. He told me he'd just moved to town, living with his uncle while figuring out what to do next. "You ever feel like you were made for more than a small town?" he asked. And I nodded, even though I wasn't sure what "more" meant yet. He talked about getting out, chasing dreams, seeing the world. I remember thinking, he's not like the other boys. He's already halfway gone. When we got to Miss Lila's porch, He handed me the dish and tipped his head. "Well, Miss Ruthie May," he said, "you just made this town a whole lot prettier." Then he winked, a real one, not the kind boys fake, and walked off like he hadn't just turned my whole little world upside down. I stood there for a long minute, holding that warm cobbler like it was the only thing keeping me tethered to earth. I didn't know what just happened exactly, but I knew something had. Something that didn't have a name yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about his eyes, the way he said my name like it tasted sweet. I wrote his name in the corner of my notebook, James Carter, over and over like a schoolgirl. And maybe I was. A girl on the edge of something she didn't understand, drawn to a storm and calling its sunlight. I didn't know then that he'd leave more than butterflies behind. I didn't know he'd teach me how deep love could run and how far pain could follow. But right then, none of that mattered. Right then, all I knew was this. My heart had started beating to a brand new rhythm, and it had his name all over it. It was late August when the county fair rolled into town, same as it did every year. But that year felt different, the air thicker, the stars closer, the music louder somehow. I was walking on air all week, counting the hours till Saturday night. James had asked me to meet him by the Ferris wheel at 7 sharp. He said he'd win me a stuffed bear and maybe, just maybe, still a kiss behind the pie stand. I'd never kissed anyone before, not really. Just once in a game of spin the bottle behind the church, but that don't count. This felt real. Big, like the start of something grown up and glittering. I remember I wore my best skirt, the yellow one that swirled when I twirled, and Mama even let me borrow her pearl clip. I felt like a movie star until Daddy saw me at the door. "Where you think you're going dressed like that?" he said, his voice flat and cold. "To the fair," I said, trying to keep my chin up. "With some friends." He narrowed his eyes. "That boy you've been talking to, he ain't from here. You don't know nothing about him." I opened my mouth, then shut it again. I wanted to scream, "You don't know him either." But I didn't. Back then, you didn't raise your voice to your daddy. You swallowed it. Like castor oil. Bitter, but expected. Mama stood behind him, wringing her hands in her apron. She didn't say a word. That's what hurt most. I wanted her to say, "Let her go. She's young. She's in love." But she didn't. She looked at the floor and let the silence speak for her. That night, I snuck out the back window. I know what you're thinking. "Lord have mercy, Ruthie. That ain't like you." And it wasn't. But I couldn't explain it then. That pull in my chest, that ache to feel something real. James was the only one who made me feel seen, alive. I didn't care if he wasn't from our town. I didn't care that he smoked cigarettes or talked back to the sheriff. He made me feel like me, not just someone's daughter or someone's chore doer. We rode the Ferris wheel that night, just like he promised. At the very top, with the lights of the fair twinkling below and the scent of popcorn hanging in the air, he leaned in and kissed me. Slow, careful, like he meant it. And I swear, for a moment, the whole world slipped away. All I could hear was my heart loud and wild in my ears. But when I got home, the world crashed back. Daddy was waiting. He didn't yell. He didn't have to. Just sat in that kitchen chair, staring like I was a stranger in his house. I'd never felt so small, so dirty, like I'd done something shameful. And truth be told, I wasn't even sure why. I hadn't done anything wrong. But the way he looked at me, like I'd betrayed him just by growing up, made the guilt settle deep in my bones. For weeks after, I felt like I was split in two, the girl who danced with James under string lights, and the girl who walked eggshells in her own home. I started lying to Mama, slipping out more. I hated it, but I couldn't stop. James was a storm, and I let myself get caught in it, even when the skies started darkening. Nobody warned me that the kind of love that burns brightest can also blind you. Nobody told me how loneliness can feel louder when you're sitting right next to someone who's drifting away. And deep down, a question started scratching at me. Was I still in control, or was I already too far gone? I remember the way the light hit the kitchen floor that morning, soft and golden, like it was trying to be kind, like it knew what was about to happen. The clock on the wall ticked louder than usual, steady and smug. Funny the things you remember when your life changes in a single breath. I'd made biscuits, just like always. James liked 'em hot, with too much butter and a drizzle of honey. I'd done it exactly the way he liked, hoping maybe today would be different. Hoping maybe the man I fell in love with would show up instead of the one who'd been creeping in, slow and cruel, over the last year. He walked in late, shirt wrinkled, eyes bloodshot. Didn't say good morning. Didn't kiss my cheek like he used to. Just grabbed his plate and sat down like a stranger in my kitchen. I asked if he was all right. Soft, careful, like you'd talk to a dog that might bite. He didn't answer. Just kept chewing, slow and hard, like he resented every bite. Then I made a mistake. I asked where he'd been the night before. Just that. Just a question. He stood up so fast the chair screeched across the tile. His face changed, twisted, like something snapped inside him. He didn't yell. That almost would have been better. He just walked over, real quiet, and before I could even think, he raised his hand. And he hit me, open palm, right across the cheek. The sound cracked through that kitchen like a gunshot. I remember the sting. But more than that, I remember the silence afterward. The way everything froze. Even the clock stopped ticking, I swear it did. Or maybe it just felt like time gave me a moment to understand what had happened. I touched my face and I couldn't believe it. Not James. Not the boy from the fair with his soft smile and slow hands. Not the one who made me feel like magic. But there it was, the heat, the shock, the deep, ugly truth. He stood there breathing heavy, hands shaking, like he couldn't believe it either. I didn't mean to, he said. You pushed me. I said nothing. I just looked at him, looked at this man I'd chosen, the man I defended, the man I thought I could fix. And right then, something inside me cracked. It wasn't just my trust. It wasn't even my heart. It was something deeper, like I'd lost the last piece of the girl I used to be. That girl who believed love meant sacrifice. That girl who thought staying quiet was the same thing as being strong. I didn't leave that day. I wish I could tell you I did. No, I stayed. And for a long while after, I wore scarves in the summer and blamed table corners for bruises on my arms. I told myself it was stress, that he'd change, that if I loved harder, gave more, he'd remember how to be gentle. But that first bruise never really healed. It sat under my skin like a secret, growing heavier with every sorry he whispered and every promise he broke. I'd sit on the edge of the bed some nights, staring at the moon, wondering how I got so lost. How the girl who danced barefoot under the stars ended up afraid of the sound of keys in the door. And that's when I realized something that changed me forever. Love should never make you feel small. It shouldn't leave you flinching. It shouldn't silence your laughter. And it sure as hell shouldn't leave a mark you have to explain away. That day I didn't leave. But I started to plan. I started to dream about a door opening, about air that didn't taste like fear. I didn't know how or when, but I knew one day I'd walk out. And next time, I wouldn't look back. After that day, everything changed. Not in a thunderclap, not in a grand, dramatic way. No, change came slow, like dusk swallowing daylight. It was quiet, and that made it worse. There were no more raised voices for a while, no slamming doors. Just silence, thick and full of things unsaid. I'd wake up each morning with my stomach in knots, waiting to see who he'd be that day. Would he be James with the soft hands and tired eyes? Or James with the sharp tongue and fists clenched at his sides? I never knew, and the not knowing, that's what wore me down. The bruises faded faster than the fear. I'd cover them with long sleeves, powdered makeup, excuses. I said I bumped into cabinets, that I tripped on the steps, that I was clumsy. I told those lies so many times, I almost believed them myself. But inside, I was fading. Piece by piece, there was a stillness in me that hadn't been there before. A kind of hollowness. I stopped writing in my notebook. I stopped singing around the house. I stopped dreaming. The girl who used to twirl in summer dresses and believe in forever had gone quiet, not because she wanted to, but because hope had turned into something dangerous. It hurt to want things. It hurt to imagine a better life, because imagining meant remembering I didn't have one. And the world, it kept spinning, like it didn't even notice. Mama passed during that time. Quiet, just like everything else. Heart gave out in her sleep. I cried, but not like you're supposed to when your mama dies. My tears were tired, like they'd run out of purpose. She never knew the truth about James. Or maybe she did. Maybe she saw more than she said. Lord knows women of her time knew how to keep their mouths shut about pain. I wore black to the funeral, and James held my hand like he was the grieving one. Folks told me how lucky I was to have a strong man to lean on. I wanted to scream, but I smiled instead. I remember standing in front of Mama's casket thinking, is this it? Is this what life becomes? Quiet meals, careful movements, prayers you don't believe in anymore. I stopped going to church. I couldn't sit in those pews and sing about light while living in so much dark. I didn't blame God, not exactly. But I couldn't find him in the house either. Not in James's footsteps. Not in the way my heart stuttered every time I heard keys in the door. I used to think faith could carry you through anything. Now I wasn't sure what I believed, except that survival and living weren't always the same thing. No one asked if I was okay. No one knew what questions to ask. And I wouldn't have told them anyway. When you live in fear long enough, it becomes a part of you, like a second skin. You learn how to smile just enough, talk just enough, disappear in plain sight. I don't remember the exact moment I stopped loving him. Maybe I never really did. Maybe I just loved the idea of him, the boy at the fair, not the man who lived in my kitchen. But I do remember the day I realized I couldn't do it anymore. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was just me, sitting at the window, watching the wind move through the trees, and knowing deep in my bones, I didn't belong in that house anymore. That whatever was left of Ruthie May, she needed to run. And this time, I wasn't going to wait for permission. I don't remember what set him off that night. It could have been anything, the way I stirred his coffee, the tone in my voice, a word I didn't say quite right. That was the thing about James. You never saw the storm coming. It just dropped from a clear sky. But that night, something was different. In me, I mean. I'd gone quiet for so long, tiptoeing around his moods, praying small prayers in the dark. But when I saw his shadow stretch across the hallway, something inside me snapped, or maybe it finally woke up. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just moved. I waited until he fell asleep on the couch, half a bottle deep, TV humming low, his hands still curled into a fist. I grabbed the old canvas bag from under the bed and filled it with what I could. One change of clothes, Mama's locket, a worn $20 bill I'd tucked away behind the bread box, and a letter I'd written to myself months earlier, but never mailed. It just said, "You deserve peace." And then, barefoot and shaking, I stepped out into the night. I didn't have a plan. I didn't even have shoes. Just fear in my lungs and dirt on my feet. I walked fast, like the devil himself was behind me. Every porch light felt like a spotlight. Every sound made me flinch. But I kept going. I didn't look back. If I did, I might freeze, might turn around, might listen to that awful voice in my head whispering, "He'll change. He said he's sorry. This is all your fault anyway." No, not this time. I must have walked 2 miles before I saw headlights. My heart nearly leapt out of my chest. I stepped back into the trees, ready to run again, but the truck slowed and pulled over. It was an old Ford, navy blue, with one broken taillight. The window rolled down, and a man leaned out, maybe in his early 30s. Soft eyes, grease-stained shirt. Kind of face you instinctively trusted, though I wasn't sure I still could trust anyone. "You okay, ma'am?" he asked. "You need help?" I didn't answer right away. My mouth was dry, and my hands were trembling. But something in his voice, it wasn't pity. It wasn't nosy. It was gentle, careful. I just need to get away," I said, barely above a whisper. He nodded once, real slow. "All right. I won't ask questions. You can sit in the truck if you'd like. I'll leave the light on." His name was Tommy. He worked at the gas station on Highway 11, just finished a late shift. He didn't try to touch me, didn't push. Just drove while I sat in the passenger seat, clutching that canvas bag like a lifeline. We didn't speak much, but the silence wasn't heavy. It was peaceful, like breathing fresh air after being underwater too long. He took me to his sister's house, a warm little place with chipped paint and porch plants, and the smell of cinnamon in the air. She didn't ask for details, just handed me a blanket and showed me to the couch. That was the first night in a long time I slept without fear. The next morning, I helped her fold laundry. We didn't talk about James. We didn't have to. She just smiled and said, "You're safe now. You can rest." And in that moment, folding shirts with a stranger, sunlight pouring through a dusty window, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope, tiny, flickering, unsure, but alive, like the first green shoot pushing up through hard soil after a long winter. I wasn't whole yet, far from it, but I was free. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to begin again. It didn't happen all at once, that kind of healing. It never does. It wasn't like the movies, where you cry once and suddenly everything's all right. No, real healing is slower, quieter. It sneaks up on you in little moments, like the first time you laugh and realize you mean it, or when you look in the mirror and see your own eyes again, not a stranger's. For me, the turning point came on a Tuesday morning, folding laundry at Tommy's sister's house. There was this old blue flannel shirt of James's I still carried around in the bottom of my bag. I don't even know why I brought it. Maybe it was habit, maybe some thread of guilt or memory, or leftover love I hadn't managed to untangle. That shirt had seen better days. Frayed at the sleeves, buttons missing. But once, I'd worn it when I was cold, and it smelled like him and tobacco and that cologne he used to wear back when he still wanted to be wanted. I pulled it out without thinking, just part of the wash. And I stared at it. Just stared. For the longest time. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just felt done. Like this old thing had been hanging on me too long. Not just the shirt, the weight. The guilt. The shame. The part of me that thought I had to carry it all to prove I survived it. I walked outside, barefoot in the dewy grass, and I hung that shirt on the line. The sun was just starting to warm up the world. Birds were making a fuss in the trees. I stood there for a minute, fingers tight on the clothespins, heart pounding like I was about to do something wild. And maybe I was, because I took it back down, folded it real neat, walked to the rusted-out barrel behind the shed, the one they used for burning yard scraps, and I threw that shirt in, just like that. I watched it catch, flames curling around it, licking the past right off the fabric. The smoke stung my eyes, but it wasn't from sadness. It was freedom. I whispered, not loud but enough to hear myself say it, "I forgive you, but I'm done carrying you." Not for a sake. Lord, no. That forgiveness wasn't for James. It was for me. For the girl I used to be. For the woman I was becoming. I had to let her go. The version of me who thought love meant suffering. The one who stayed too long. Believed too hard. Lost too much. And I'll tell you what, Something broke loose inside me in that moment. Something heavy. I went back inside, made myself a cup of tea, and sat at the kitchen table with both hands wrapped around the mug like it was an anchor. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting on anything. Not a knock at the door. Not an apology. Not even permission to start over. I'd given it to myself. That same afternoon, I took a walk into town. Just to move my legs, just to feel the sun. I saw a little girl on the sidewalk, maybe 10 years old, drawing stars with pink chalk. She looked up and smiled at me like she'd known me forever. And I thought, she'll grow up. She'll fall in love. She'll get hurt, maybe. But maybe she'll also know her worth sooner than I did. I smiled back, and in that smile was everything I'd chosen. Not revenge. Not regret. Just life. I didn't know where it would lead. I didn't have a map. But I knew this much. I chose to keep living. Without blame. Without shame. Just forward. One breath at a time. It's a strange thing, looking back. Like flipping through an old photo album. You see yourself smiling, but you remember what came after. The stories behind the pictures. The ache between the pages. And yet you also see how far you've come. What you lived through. What you carried and what, by God's grace, you finally laid down. I don't have all the answers, never did, but I do have a few truths I've earned the hard way. And I figured maybe, just maybe, somebody out there needed to hear 'em. For starters, love ain't supposed to hurt. I know folks say that all the time, but I don't think it really sinks in until you've lived the other side of it. Love should hold you up, not wear you down. It should feel like coming home, not like walking on eggshells in your own skin. And if it does hurt, if you're crying more than you're Logan, if you're apologizing for your own light just to keep someone else from dimming, well, sugar, that ain't love. That's control wrapped in a vow. I used to think staying made me strong. That being loyal meant talking the hits and forgiving faster than they could throw the next one. But real strength. It's quiet. It's leaving when everything in you is scared to. It's standing up, shaking, heart broken your chest, and saying no more. Real strength is knowing you deserve peace, even if you gotta build it from scratch. Tommy, bless his soul, never tried to fix me. He just sat beside me and held the silence until I was ready to speak. He didn't rush the healing, didn't push for the happy ending. He let me be, and somehow, that being turned into belonging. Not because I needed him to save me, but because I'd finally saved myself, and still, he stayed. That right there is what love looks like when it's honest. These days, I sit out on my porch swing with my tea and my cat and my soft old blankets, and I think about that girl I was. 17 and shining, then 27 and shattered, then 50 and rebuilding. I used to think I'd wasted too many years, but now I know none of it was wasted. Not even the pain. It carved out space in me. Space for tenderness, for truth, for grace I can offer others, because I finally learned to offer it to myself. If you're listening to this, maybe you're waiting for something, for someone to change, for a sign, for a miracle. Lord knows I waited long enough for all three. But here's what I learned. Sometimes the miracle is you deciding you're done waiting. That your life starts now. Not after an apology. Not after they come around. Not after the perfect timing. Just now. Because peace doesn't knock. You have to open the door and go look in for it. And if you're afraid, that's all right. Do it afraid. Walk barefoot into the night if you have to. Shake, cry, whisper your way through it. Just don't stay where your spirit's drinking. You were made for more than survival. You were made for joy, for softness, for second chances. And maybe, just maybe, it's time you stopped waiting for permission to take yours. Well, if you've stayed with me this long, bless your heart. I don't know why it's taken me all these years to say this out loud. Maybe because some stories take time to ripen, like late summer peaches. They're better when you let 'em sit a while. And now, sitting here in my old rocking chair with my cat snoring at my feet and the sound of wind in the chimes, I reckon this is the right moment to tell you one last thing. This story, it isn't just about the past. No, honey, it's about right now. It's about every woman sitting in silence, wondering if she's allowed to want more. Every heart that's trying to beat again after breaking. Every person standing at the edge of what now and thinking maybe it's too late. Well, I'm here to tell you it ain't. Not by a long shot. I still get up some mornings and reach for that old feeling, the weight, the worry, the habit of fear. It's funny how even when you're free, your mind still checks the locks. But then I walk out to my rose bushes, pour my coffee, and breathe in this quiet I fought for. I earned this peace, stitch by stitch, step by trembling step. And let me tell you, it's sweeter than I ever imagined. Tommy's gone now, past 2 winters back. Quietly, like everything he ever did. We had 36 years together. 36 gentle, steady, laughter-filled, healing years. He never once raised his voice to me, never made me feel like I was too much or not enough. And not a day goes by I don't thank the good Lord for that night on the roadside. The night he stopped his truck and said, "You don't have to go back." Sometimes I sit out here in the evening, and I talk to him like he's still sitting in that chair across from me, tapping his thumb against the armrest like he always did when he was thinking. And sometimes, I swear, the wind picks up right then, and I like to think, maybe he hears me, maybe he answers. And sometimes I wonder, do people ever truly leave us? Or do they find ways to stay, just a little softer, just a little farther out of sight? So, I've told you my story, the bright parts and the dark, the hurt and the healing. I didn't leave anything out 'cause I figured if I was gonna tell it, I'd tell it real. You deserve that. We all do. But now I want to ask you something. Do you believe real love finds its way back? Even after the storms? Even after the years? 'Cause I do. I believe love changes shape. Sometimes it walks beside you, sometimes it carries you, and sometimes it lives only in your memory, but strong as ever. And if you're lucky, you get to see it twice. Once when it finds you, and again when you finally learn to believe you're worthy of it. So if you're sitting there wondering if it's too late for your story to change, darling, it isn't. Not today. Not ever. And maybe, just maybe, the part you're living right now is the beginning of something better. So, I'll leave you with this. What are you still waiting for? And what if it's already waiting for you? Go ahead. Tell me in the comments. I'm listening. Always have been. And sometimes, when the wind moves just right through the roses, I think maybe he's listening, too.